Anita, how's your mental health?
Questionable at all times. You know this.
Yeah, how's the mental health of your children?
Also a little bit tricky. Can I tell you my experience in trying to find therapists for myself and my kids, Mel?
Yes, please.
Okay, this is how it goes. You ask around your friends and your family for a referral for somebody who's nearby. You finally find somebody who sounds like they might work for your family. You give them a call and you find out that A, they're not accepting new patients, or B, they have a huge wait list. So you start over again and you ask people if they know anybody who would be a good therapist and a good fit. Finally, you find one, you go and you meet with them and you figure out that you don't actually like them that much. But it's been so much work to find somebody who you can go to in your area that you're kind of stuck with them. Well, do you have any ideas for how to get around this?
I do, because guess what? I've actually had some therapists that I have found on my own, which involves what you're saying. Sometimes I remember one time I was like 3 hours in the bathtub on my phone looking through websites. I was such a prune at the end. But I have also had the experience with working with BetterHelp. And it was like, I don't want to say too good to be true, but because it is true, but it's like amazing because I was matched with my therapist within 24 hours.
And you didn't have to go through all of that other ridiculous process of trying to find somebody. And here's the cool thing too, is if that person didn't work out for you, you can just switch and say, and it's not like you're committing to another years long search for somebody who you're going to jive with.
It's true. And I lucked out, or maybe just BetterHelp is really good at matching people together because I never had to change my therapist. I loved her. Perfect fit for me. And I know that some of our friends have used BetterHelp and they've had to change therapists, and boom, same day, you can change.
Easy peasy.
You can ghost your therapist. Get a new one.
I love this idea. BetterHelp is one of our sponsors. If you use our promo code trybetterhelp.com/WWDN, you get 10% off your first month. And we totally recommend it.
Yes. Get some therapy. That's trybetterhelp.com/WWDN. Anita.
Yes, my friend Mel.
We have had such teamwork this past week.
Teamwork makes the dream work, so they say.
Like, seriously, from the start of the week to the end of the week.
I know.
We're kind of awesome.
Not to brag or anything, but we're pretty cool.
I really loved how our week started. Would you like to tell everybody about it?
Sure. Mel and I went for an epic bike adventure. We started at my house. We rode to the cemetery that Jason's buried in. And then we got back on our bikes and we rode up the biggest of the hugest of the hills. And then we rode across the mountains to the cemetery that Scott is buried in.
We went grave to grave.
Yes, we did a cemetery crawl.
Instead of a pub crawl.
Yeah. It's
a grave
more
crawl.
morose, less alcohol.
Yes. It took 3 hours.
It did take a long time, and it was fun.
I loved it. I love my bike so much. And I love that, Anita, that you get so mad when I pass you on the hill going up.
It's because it's stupid.
But I'm cheating, obviously.
I know. The only time that gave me pleasure was when you had to walk your bike up a section and you were walking in. It was like your bike weighs like 1,000 pounds. And then we got home and you said, guess what? I just found that my bike has a feature to push it up hills. And I was like, dang it. That was my only time that I could chortle and laugh at you.
It's true. The only time Anita looked at me with glee and that she felt better than me was when I had to push my bike up the hill. And now your dreams are dashed.
Mm-hmm. So, whatever. I don't hate you 100%. Just like 27% when we're going up hills.
I like going up the hills so much. Oh
I would too if I were you. It is kind of fun. I rode your bike for a minute and it is fun. So that was our adventure of the beginning of the week.
Yeah.
And then did other things happen during the week?
Yeah, yesterday I had epic editing.
Oh, yes.
Feats to accomplish.
Yes, because today's episode was less than ideal for editing.
The content, not. The content was amazing.
Yeah.
It was such a great episode. We love our guests. But when you have internet delay, it scares me.
So I told Mel that she needed to think about it like a video game, and this was boss level. And then I took her some snacks, and then she she like,
I leveled up. I beat the boss.
yeah.
So Anita dropped snacks on my porch last night at like 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah. Which was also a big feat for me because yesterday I went running with my friend Anne and we went into the mountains and got ourselves lost. And it was so fun. And also just a little bit terrifying.
I read that you did not take any water.
I did not.
Why?
Because I can't find my little handheld water bottle, and we weren't supposed to go that far, and so I have like a running backpack that holds a lot of water. I was like, oh, we're not going that far. I don't need to carry that with me. And I was sad I didn't have it with me. Very sad.
Well, now I want to hear if you have any life lessons learned related to grief with that adventure.
Huh.
Do you?
I did not think about that at all, but we just kept saying like, we'll know if we need to turn around at the top of that next hill. And then we would get to the top of the next hill, and then we'd go, we'll know if we're in the right place at the top of the next hill. And I kept saying, like, I'm sure I know where we are. But then we got to where we came back out to the road. We were nowhere near where I thought we were.
So maybe putting one foot in front of the other?
Yes. And laughing a lot and complaining a lot.
Yeah.
And drink water.
Take a water bottle all the time, no matter what.
Yeah. Now we know where not to go.
See? There you go. You told me that today has been bad for you.
It's been stupid.
Why?
Today was the first day that we have gone back to church with our entire congregation. And my kids, 2 of them specifically, were just awful during church. And I spent the whole time being like, why am I even doing this? This is so stupid. And missing Jason because could really use another pair of hands. Like a lot. And my friends, they sit with us and they help. But it still is, it's just a highlight of the situation. And then as soon as I got back home, I opened Instagram and saw a picture of the swim team that Jason swam with in the mornings, and they'd gone out to breakfast. And of course, he's not in that picture. And I just started bawling. I'm like, he's gone. They're continuing with their life. They had a fun breakfast. Probably didn't think about Jason at all,
I heard that you had a surprising good thing with number 2 this week.
I did. So my number 2 is generally hard. He's a hard kid. But yesterday, I don't know what happened, but I would like to recreate it somehow. Maybe I'll have to pay a shaman or visit a witch doctor. I don't know. But he said he went to Lagoon, which is a local amusement park. He went with a friend, and on the way to and on the way there, he said something to his mom's friend, and she texted it to me later, and it was like the sweetest thing I'd ever heard. And I was like, really? He said that? But he basically said he didn't need to meet any famous people because he'd met me. And I was the best person that there was.
Aww.
Yeah, I'll read what he said. I don't care to meet anyone famous. Do you know why? Because I know my mom, and she is the coolest person ever. She takes care of us and does everything all by herself without a husband. She's the strongest person I know, and she never gives up.
Aww.
I know. And I should just keep reading that so that makes my today better. And to be fair to him, he was one of the good ones in church today. So
Wow.
I only had to threaten him like twice. And everybody around us was just laughing. They thought it was hilarious. But my number 3 kept yelling, "Is this done yet? When can we go home?" Oh. And I'm just like, this transition back to public life is going to be rough.
Church in your pajamas versus going to church. Mm-hmm. I kind of understand his point.
Yeah. And I was trying in my head to be like, okay, see it from his point of view, see it from his point of view. But I was still just like, shut up.
I was talking to a friend this week. We grew up together, and then we haven't seen each other for a really long time. And she was telling me, we were just having the conversation about how it's so different now than when we were growing up. And we're kind of in this interesting mix of thought about parenting. Mm-hmm. And having kids in general. And I know a lot of my friends are seeing a lot of the pressures that it has taken to have kids and to raise kids. And they're teaching their kids, hey, whatever you want to do in life is super cool. Whereas we were more like, well, the formula is you do this. And so it's been interesting to see what people have done with that information. I've seen some people on Instagram that I've been following for a couple of years where they're pro athletes, like skiers, and they're also parents. And so they talk about being a parent and also doing the things that they're passionate about and trying to balance both or make both work. And then there are people that talk about they don't have kids and then they like their choices. And then there are people that do have kids and they like their choices. But my friend, it was interesting because she was like, man, it's hard like all of the time. And she goes, every once in a while you see a shred of, oh man, my kid is a really good person and doing good things. There's hope. And I know that not all my friends feel like that. Some of my friends have easy kids.
Yeah.
And so they're like, well, what are you talking about? Like,
they can always see them, like, yeah.
They always have a lot of that positive sort of responses. But it's always interesting. I have a couple friends that have kids with disabilities or things like autism or hard personalities and difficult challenges. Maybe have had abuse in the past. And those are always the parents of the kids that are like, this is so hard. This is the reality of it. So I think it's interesting just to hear perspectives of parenting. Because obviously I don't know anything about it, but I did grow up in everybody just has this and this equals your happiness. And you're here like, well, no, look, I had this little glimpse, but it's hard most of the time.
I always say that parenting is 51% joy and 49% the worst. And a big 1% makes a huge difference. I felt like in parenting, but also just in the grief sphere, this is just a little microcosm because yesterday I was feeling really great. And then today you just expect to build off of that, and then you go backwards, and then you feel like, dang it. It's one step forward, 2 steps back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It just feels sometimes like you can't ever anticipate what's coming next. And you have to really appreciate the good days when they're there and then not expect them to be there the next day or even the next minute.
It sounds so volatile.
Yeah.
When you put it that way.
I mean, life is like that too, with or without kids, with easy, quote unquote, easy kids, with hard kids, with whatever, with no kids, with dogs, with whatever. Life is never a flat line. It's up and down and sideways and back and forth. And grief just makes it a little bit more volatile because there's more emotions and there's harder challenges that get thrown at you.
It seems like it turns up the volume.
Yeah. Which sounds like a good thing, but I don't know if that's true.
Then, because life is so weird, it's probably like, well, in the long run, you're going to look back and be like, that stretched me and made me grow. And it was the worst. It was the worst at the time, but it was the best thing for me now. But when you're in it, currently.
I mean, even I can look back in the 2+ years that I've been doing this, I think, wow, I have come so far. I'm such a different person. I've been stretched and my brain is grown in ways that it would never have grown. And I can only imagine what it's going to be like in 50 years, unless I'm dead.
And if you're dead, you probably won't have a headstone. In that case, put me in charge.
Okay. Will do.
And you and Jason will both finally get your headstone. And
okay. Very cool. Thank you.
That's going to happen. So, well, I'm sorry that you had a tough week, but also really glad to hear what number 2 said. Yeah. That's really big progress. Yeah. That's huge.
It was nice. It was nice for him to, like you said, to have that little glimpse of like, oh, we are doing an okay job. Like, he does see and appreciate me every so often, because mostly it feels like none of them do. They don't realize the stress and the strain and the, what's going on right now because they can't. They don't understand.
That's kind of what my friend was saying too. Yeah. She's just like, it's such hard work and does it even matter? And then you have the little shred.
Yeah. Speaking of hard work, we're going back out of town this week. I'm hoping it's going to go more smoothly than the last time we went out of town. I've checked and double checked my tickets and That's good. I'm not going at 9:30 at night, so hopefully it will go better. We're going to go up to Oregon and spend the week on the beach.
The cold beach.
The cold beach. I know.
Say hi to Melissa.
I will. I'll wave to her because, I mean, there's only one place at the beach, right? There's only one singular beach in Oregon.
Just one.
Yeah.
One gigantic long one.
Okay, kind of.
It goes either into Washington or to California.
Yeah. So that should be interesting. I'll report back. Well, actually, our next podcast, I will be there. So maybe you'll get a report.
Ooh.
You'll get a report as it's happening. If you guys are a part of the Widow Wives Club, you will have noticed, hopefully, that we posted a link to a questionnaire that we want all of our Widow Wives Club members to fill out. We're getting to the point where we can't keep track of everybody, and we want to be able to keep track of where you all are physically in your grief journey so that we can make better connections and support you better. So if you haven't seen the announcement in the Widow Wives Club, hop on over to the Facebook page. This is just for the members of the Widow Wives Club, so the widows and widowers, and fill out that questionnaire. It's not required, but we would really like to get all of our members to fill that out. And you can let us know in there if you want us to keep your information more private or if you're okay with us making connections with other people. For instance, if your husband died of glioblastoma, you might be interested to know of the other widows who had that same experience, and we can better keep track of that to help make connections like that.
Speaking of the Widow Wives Club, remember to join if you have not already. It's the private group on Facebook, and answer all the questions.
And thank you so much to Julianne for helping us with that. We really appreciate she stepped up and is helping us to sort through the
Nigerian Prince
Yes.
applications that we get. Oh man, we got some weird ones this week.
We sure did.
Epic.
Yep. I'm still trying to figure out what was happening in that one. But, yep, that was fun.
And we also have our public Facebook page. And on Wednesdays, we do Widow Win Wednesdays. Now, that is for anybody that follows the page, whether you are a grief civilian or you are a widow. Look out for that and tell us what is happening that's good in your world on Wednesdays. And if that means you got out of bed, that's awesome.
We love to read those because sometimes they're huge and sometimes they're small, but doesn't matter. We like to read them all. So remember that on Wednesdays. Speaking of platforms, remember to give us a review and a rating. It's not just for our egos, although it does help my ego. I will admit it. But it also helps potential listeners give us a try and see that we might have something to offer them. And we're just trying to reach as many widows, widowers, people going through other grief situations or other loss, as well as their grief civilians. So share the podcast, rate and review, help us to reach others. Sometimes we assume that unless we had a huge life insurance payout, we don't really need to know anything about investments or even finances. But guess what? A little knowledge of finances is critical for all of us. Maybe your partner was in charge of that stuff, and now you find yourself making all the decisions. Maybe you're mad about that. Maybe I am. Nicole from the He's Gone But the Money's Not podcast is here to help. She tackles financial literacy by telling the stories of women and widows and finance experts and shares the lessons they've learned as certified financial planners. Whether you know a lot and feel confident in your financial decisions or feel unsure about all of that stuff, there is more to learn. Listen and subscribe to the He's Gone But the Money's Not podcast on all podcast platforms. This ad was paid for by Rockhouse Financial, an SEC-registered investment advisor.
Yes, and that means you could even share on Instagram, on Facebook, that you like our podcast and that it's helpful for people in grief. And again, like Anita said, it's to help us be visible so we can help more people, so we can connect with more people so that they can find a community as well, as you guys all know, since you are part of it. So that's why, and also to help Anita's ego. 10% of that.
Yes, because don't make me think you guys are riding an e-bike. Let me win, okay?
You guys, if you haven't joined our Patreon, you might want to. It starts at $5 and goes up from there, and we have 4 tiers. The first level is basic support, and it helps us to keep the podcast going. The level up from that has a few more things in it, in addition to helping Anita get a babysitter so she does not lose her mind as much. And we have a couple other levels above that have even more fun things like behind the scenes videos, input on episodes, input on the music that goes under the Patreon shout out, all sorts of fun things. So we have a lot of fun stuff planned and already up in there. So please consider joining. It also helps us to help others. And one of those benefits is a Patreon shout out, which we are going to do right now.
So you guys, a benefit of being a patron is that you get to see behind the scenes. And Mel actually made a behind the scenes about selecting the music for the patron shout out. And you guys might think that it's really easy, but a lot goes into it. So if you want to see how she does that, how she creates the tracks and chooses the tracks that go behind the music, then join our Patreon and you'll be able to see it. It takes a long time.
And if you want to see how I make us sound less stupid, you can also check it out. I made a couple of videos. Some of them are not quite up yet, but
they'll be there
scheduled
soon. Yes.
Yep.
We're going to start with our incognito widow. And she says to all of you, you got this. Keep going.
And now we have Constance Dahlbach,
David Kelly,
Don Satterwhite,
Ivan the Meisner,
TM, not TM,
R.
C, R, Cat.
And then we'll continue on with our widow wives. We have Amy Sapp,
Ashley Hahn,
Mindy Holmgren.
your twin.
Yes, one of them.
Danielle Katterberg, meow.
Dennis Barrasso,
Jenny Taylor,
Jenny Wang,
Kirsten Stromberg,
Laura Bradbury,
Missy Schubert,
I'm going to make you a quesadilla, Rachel Barbosa,
Sarah Morris,
Sylvia,
The Shore, Karen Cornejo, The Winehouse,
Anna Tracy,
Christina Scambato,
Christina Anderson,
Diana Becker,
Emily Thornton,
Emily Toledo,
Erin and Opal,
oh, Gabe Lozano,
Ileana Bell,
Jamie Aliota,
the real favorite sister,
Anita's mom, who watched her kids so we could go on our grave crawl,
yes, thanks, Mom, Jenny Barrow,
Fancy Lady, Joy Kirsch,
CFP, CEFT,
CEFT,
Katie Radcliffe,
Cara Scara,
Lori Farrington,
Marie Hoffman,
Marjorie Lewis,
Mary McGowan,
Shannon Helm,
Tammy Schwartz,
Tara Wallace,
Valerie the Meat Packer.
the whole spectrum of the Rainbow Wendy.
And that is all.
Thank you so much for all of your support, those who are already patrons. Like Mel said before, if you're interested in joining our Patreon account, it's patreon.com/WWDN. And Mel and I have found a new favorite taco place, so if you want to buy us a taco, go to buymeacoffee.com/widowwedonow.
We've actually gone and used the money to eat actual tacos.
And they were so dang delicious.
So thank you.
Should we get to our episode?
Yes, I loved this one. This was such a good conversation, and I love these gals.
So, I'm Anita.
I'm Mel.
We're two young widows trying to make it day after day and trying to figure out...
Widow! Oh my gosh!
Widow we do now. Mel, are you like me?
Not all the time.
Do you feel like self-care is sometimes just another task in a very, very long list of to-dos?
Yes, especially when it involves driving somewhere to self-care.
Would you appreciate it if somebody just told you what to do?
Yeah, are you going to tell me?
No.
Oh.
But the Filled with Gold box is going to tell you.
What is it?
It arrives on your porch every month, and it's filled with items to help you with self-care.
Is it filled with gold also?
I wish. That would be very heavy and very expensive. No, it's filled with 5 to 7 premium self-care items to help you figure out what you can do to take care of yourself.
Excellent. How do I order it?
Go to filledwithgold.org and make sure that you use the promo code WWDN to get 10% off.
These widow care boxes are made by our widow friend, Melissa, who has started a company to help fellow widows self-care.
And if you are a widow who makes things, get in touch with us because she is trying to source items from widows as well. So if you make soap or lotions or chapstick or smelly things or yummy things, let us know.
Once again, that's filledwithgold.org and use the code WWDN on checkout for a 10% discount.
Thanks, Melissa. We hope you guys will buy one for a friend because when you take care of yourself, you're able to take care of others and also the many things that you are required to take care of.
Bye! Anita, what the heck?
I'm so excited to introduce, we have for the first time today a 2-for-1. 2 people are joining us. So that means there's a total of 4 of us, which is a technological nightmare. So today we have with us Mira Simone. Hi, Mira.
Hi.
Welcome. And we have Dana Frost. Hi, Dana.
Hi.
You might know them by their Instagram names. Dana is Forced Joy Project, and Mira is New Moon Mira. Did I get that right?
Yeah, good job.
Yes. So thanks, guys, for joining us. We're excited to see how this goes with 4 people.
Where are you guys coming from? Mira, tell us first.
I'm in Northern Ontario.
Yay!
Oh, we have a Northern Ontario fan among us?
We're talking about Canada.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yes, we're talking about Canada. Yes.
Not like Ontario, Northern Ontario, California. I love Canada. Yes.
Okay. Well, so all of Canada does not have poor Wi-Fi. Much of Canada actually has good Wi-Fi. But for the past month or so, we've been staying with my mother-in-law because she is, well, you guys know, because I think at least one of you is an only parent, right? If not, at least one of you is an only parent. So I'm an only parent. Yeah, you. Okay. So I'm an only parent and it's really hard. And so I am staying with Brian's mom right now, and she's helping me out with my daughter, and she lives in Northern Ontario. So that's where I am. And there's just certain areas where the internet has not caught up to the rest of the world yet. So that's where I am.
Is it like negative 27 degrees there too?
Yes. It definitely is. Mm-hmm.
That is why Canada should not be populated in the winter. Because you go outside and your ears fall off, and that's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it toughens us up. We're pretty tough folk, I'd say, overall. And there's a lot of good things about Canada, like universal health care.
So your ears are very, like, tough.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
I'm
fine.
very tough. We are all very tough.
So I am now in northern Michigan, not quite as far north as Mira, but also the land of limited Wi-Fi and internet and very cold. Actually, when I moved there, the first thing I did when I looked at my house was ask about the internet, make sure my cell phone worked because it's so rare and it's terrible to find. So these are very important things. So Mira, as you explore, where else? Internet and phone service.
Top of the
High
list.
Priorities. We met on the internet, like so many beautiful relationships do. And we have not met in person, which we talk about it a lot. But COVID, Canadians won't let us in. So I'd love to go to Mira's right now.
Me too. Party at Mira's house with no Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I was just going to say Mira's pretty much homeless right now. So I don't think we're going to be able to have a party at Mira's house, but...
So I started an account called the Forced Joy Project, which started out not as anything intentional, and it certainly wasn't going to be a business. It was more of a survival tool. When my husband got sick, he was diagnosed with cancer, and we were just having some really tough moments, and I needed to basically force joy in our lives. And we started just posting about like the little moments of joy that we could find in the middle of hospital visits and, trips to the oncologist and emergencies and all of the shit that you go through in difficult moments of life. And I continued it after Brad died, and it really formed into this community of people where we talk about grief and loss. And I'm a big believer in having honest conversations. And, Mira and I have now talked a lot about the taboo conversations and wanting to bring more light to that. And I think you guys are doing a great job of that as well. And now at the Forced Joy Project, I created what I call the Book of Stories, which helps people capture stories of somebody that they lost and turned it into a book, so that we have these stories that from other people, from loved ones, from friends and family members, especially for widows and widows with children, has been really, really important. So that's kind of where Forced Joy Project has gone.
I think that's such an awesome idea, because all you have left of your person, unless you have their ashes, which is not really useful, is their memories.
Right.
And so to be able
Right.
to like keep those and hold those and preserve those and gather from different sources, that means a lot. I remember just being like, tell me, everybody tell me, you know, if you have a story, please
Right.
tell me, because I might not know it if I wasn't there present for it. And even if I was present, maybe I forgot it because it wasn't a big deal to me.
Right. And I think so many people, it's the beginning, like during the memorial service and those first couple weeks, and it's like, I'm not registering anything you're saying. So everyone's sharing all these stories and laughter and, you know, all these beautiful things, and it's in one ear and out the other. Like I couldn't possibly comprehend. So having a place to write that down and capture them was just really important for me.
So Dana and Mira, how old are you guys? Dana, you first.
I am 37.
Mira, how old are you?
I'm 36.
Mira, you have a kid or kids, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have one kid.
Dana, do you have kids?
No children, just puppies.
You guys are like us, except for Anita has 4 kids.
Oh my God, 4 kids. That's wild. Wow.
I know.
That's a lot.
It's a handful.
Feel sorry for me. It's too many. Mira, how did you become a widow? And then what made you decide to start sharing your widow grief experience to the public?
So I became a widow. We're almost at 2 years, which is wild. It's going to be 2 years at the end of March. My partner's name is Brian, and he developed a really, really aggressive cancer. And there was about 7 weeks from diagnosis to his death. So super traumatic, really, really, really fast. And I was very unprepared, as I'm sure everybody is, and really honestly did not have any intention of starting anything remotely close to what I have. I really just started writing on Instagram because I didn't know how to survive and I thought I was going to die. And I had always loved writing, but I had never really done it in any sort of serious way. And actually, when the night that Brian was diagnosed, which was exactly 2 years ago, I remember he had fallen asleep that night and I was just like pacing around the house and I was like, I'm going insane. I don't know what to do with myself. And I had this really strong impulse to write. And I just saw this journal on this shelf and I was like, I don't know, I'm the kind of person where I seem to only write when life is hard or when there are things that are challenging. And so I started writing then. And like, as he was dying, those 7 weeks, I was just writing constantly. And for some reason, when he died, I started having this urge to share my writing with no real reason other than for some reason that I didn't understand why. That was the only thing that helped, was writing and then also sharing the writing. Somehow that made me feel less alone. And I didn't even care how people responded. Like, it wasn't even about the other people, but there was something about sharing it that was the only tool that actually helped me, especially in early grief. And I knew nothing about Instagram. And I really honestly was in complete shock and was just like, but all I wanted to do was write. So I wrote constantly and things just kind of went from there, like very kind of organically. And around the year mark, I applied for a grant from the Canada Council for the Arts to start writing an actual memoir. And then I got the grant. And so that was really amazing because then I was able to sort of devote more time to my writing and have it actually be paying me. And so that's been really helpful for me in my grief. And so that's kind of my jam. I kind of just write about my experience and then also about grief literacy and about taboo subjects within grief that nobody wants to talk about. That's kind of my thing.
How old was your daughter, Mira, and how old is she now? Or you can just pick one of those to answer, because that's a lot of math.
So my daughter turned 3 2 weeks after Brian died, which was the most horrible birthday party ever. And I cried throughout the entire thing. It was pretty brutal. And she's almost 5 now.
Well done. You even did the mathematics portion of this quiz. I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
Dana, what do you do professionally, or what do you do for a job?
I am a Jack or a Jill of all trades. So, I mean, it really, when I moved up north, when I left Detroit and moved to Northern Michigan, part of that was I was working in a nonprofit in Detroit, and I really wanted to make my own schedule. I have a background in communications and marketing. And so I work mostly with small businesses doing anything from writing, editing, social media, email marketing, just kind of whoever will hire me to do anything in that realm, I do it.
You're just like, give me some money, whoever will give me money.
Right. And it's very chaotic because I'm keeping track of a million different things and never feel caught up with anything.
Perfect. That's the perfect like widow brain combination too, where you're like, I can't keep track of anything, and then give me a million things to do. It'll be fine.
Exactly.
How long ago did your husband die, Dana?
So it was just 4 years on January 22nd. So he passed away in 2017.
Okay, Mel, are you noticing that they are like the same as us?
Yes.
Same timeline.
Mel is a little bit before me, and then Mel has the dogs, and then I followed Mel, and I have the kids. So, and I think it's super interesting that you guys are both cancer widows. We're both sudden
deathers. I'm a musician, so the freelance, all this stuff you're talking about, all the million jobs.
Yeah, you get it.
Yep.
You get it.
And that's why she's in a band in Detroit and lives in Utah. Now I have a for real question for these two. Do you ever feel, I feel this way sometimes, like people look to you to be the all-knowing
grief professor?
Yes. And do you ever feel like, actually, I don't know anything, I just know my experience, and I know that my experience differs from everybody, but people are looking to me to speak for all the widows? Dana, you want to answer that first?
Yes, 100%. And what a weird feeling. And as I am not an expert, I have no education, like formal education in grief or human behavior or psychology. And so the idea that random people on the internet, that friends that I know are asking me these questions, I'm like, I could be full of shit. Like, I really don't know. I'm only, like you said, I'm only sharing my experience. I'm sharing what personally helped me, what hurt me, and just kind of hope for the best. But we're not, because we have life experience. And that's, what I have to remind myself is that's really that's so much more important than the education. And let's learn about grief from some other perspective that's not been lived in. I think that lived in experience really matters, especially when you're connecting with another human on a face-to-face level. So, try and tell myself that when I feel like a total fake.
So I have something to say about this, which is that I actually do have an education in not grief specific, but I have a master's in occupational therapy, and a huge part of occupational therapy is mental health. And
we are the same.
Really? Are you serious? No way. You're an OT?
I'm a physical therapist.
Okay, that's different. But yeah, that is
no, I'm a PT.
Similar realm. It is kind of weird.
Still.
No, it is weird. This is a little weird.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So a lot of OT is mental health, and I've exclusively worked in mental health for my entire career as an OT, which is like a decade. And we did not get an actual education about grief. And I think this is an issue across like many mental health fields, is that there isn't actually a good understanding of what lived experiences of grief are actually like for grievers. And I'm actually going to be speaking at the University of Alberta in March, lecturing about grief, because for the first time they're incorporating a module about grief, which has never happened before. So I think it's true. I have imposter syndrome too, obviously. Like, I think so many of us do, especially women, because we're like brainwashed to think that we don't know anything, even though we do. But honestly, I think that our lived experiences are really valid. And I think it's just really important to always, and I'm sure I know Dana always does this and I do this, and I'm sure you guys too, like just be careful not to like speak for everybody, like always just say like, this is my experience and if it resonates to other people, with other people, that means that you're touching upon some sort of universal thing that people are relating to in some way, even if it's not, yes, that's my experience 100%. I think it's totally valid to just be like, this is what I feel. And if people connect with that, that's awesome, right? Because then we feel less alone, because grief is so quacking, isolating.
Here is something that has caused me to think ever since I became a widow. I've been floored at how unprepared people are for grief, and so shocked, even within the psychology world, like general mental health, how grief is not talked about. Why do you guys think it's so weird, right? Because every single person on the planet will die. It's a guarantee. Not everybody's gonna have a mental disorder, you know what I mean? It's like grief is something that's so universal. Like, what is the deal?
So I've thought a lot about this. I love this question so much because it's true. And I've experienced some therapists that have been extremely grief illiterate since Brian died. And I know that in the mental health profession, there is not a lot of education. And even if they say like, one of the things I treat is grief. No, if they're not a grief specific therapist, I have yet, and I feel like this is a common thing because I've talked to a lot of people that feel this way too. It's hard to find grief literate mental health support. And I think that we live in a death phobic society. And I think that things are shifting very slowly. And this is part of the reason why I feel so strongly about sharing my experience. There's so many reasons, like that's not the only reason, but that is definitely one of the main reasons for me, is that I felt like I was so unprepared for this. I literally thought, I feel like I say this all the time, but I literally thought that grief would last 1 year and then I would be completely back to normal, or like always, it would always be something that would be in my life, but I did not think I was so unprepared for what it's actually like. I did not think that it was going to be like this. And there's so many things that surprised me. And I feel like by people like us, even though we feel like, oh my God, is what I'm saying even important? By us speaking up and saying, this is what it's actually like, this is the lived experience, like we are changing the narrative. And I think that that's so important because, I mean, gosh, we know the narrative is bullshit. We know, because how many people, I'm sure like every person that comes on your podcast says something like that. I feel like I hear it every day from people reaching out to me and saying that. And I think it's derived from being, our whole society just being so death phobic, so positive, so obsessed with positivity and silver linings, and with lots of things like even mental health challenges, there can always be hope. There can always be getting better. Grief is something that that's it. The person is dead. They're not coming back. And that is too difficult, I think, for a society that is obsessed with things always ending out on a positive note or being tied up nicely with a nice bow at the end. That's too difficult for a lot of people to even stomach. And I think that that's a big part of the reason why a lot of people don't really talk about what it's honestly and actually like.
I mean, I think along with that, even in the medical world, and I don't know about your guys' experience, but when Brad was sick and dying, it's amazing how the doctors, like his oncologists, his team, like never were like, he's going to die. Like it was avoided by the people that are treating him and know better than anyone else. And there's no preparation. And I've had other experiences, I'm now taking care of my dad, and he's passed away, and it was a different experience because I knew what to ask and knew the conversation and the questions. But it just, if you are not pushing for that information, even the people that know this person's going to die avoid it. And that just baffles my mind that those people aren't trained on how to have those conversations, unless you are in, palliative care or hospice, and that is the focus of your job. But even then, I feel like you have to really want it and ask for it, and like tell them, I want you to be upfront with me to get that kind of information.
So we've heard that from many of our guests, that even though their person had a terminal type diagnosis, their death was still a surprise. And one of our guests talked about being in the hospital and somebody handing her a pamphlet on death and dying and reading through it and thinking to herself, oh, you're dying, like right now. And nobody told her, they just handed her a pamphlet. And that's how she figured out. She didn't think that they were anywhere near to the point of dying. And that's how she figured it out. Because nobody ever said like, oh, by the way, he's gonna die soon.
It's just crazy to me. And it was similar with me. We had a good friend who was a doctor and was able to see all of Brad's scans and stuff. And he had called me and was like, his organs are shutting down. You need to call his family. And his actual oncologist called me in the morning, is like, well, this isn't working. We're going to try this other treatment, like literally nothing. And it took our friend to be like, he has probably days, weeks at best. And I'm just like, how in the world is no one on his actual team preparing me for this? And I'm 33 years old, and I don't know, like, to call nurses or to bring in hospice or to do anything, and just like panicked. And it just is insane to me.
How did these things get changed in training? I only went to music school, so we don't talk about it there. But how does something like that become normal? What has to happen? Do you know?
Well, I was going to say, first of all, OTs and PTs are different because OTs care more about your feelings. And so now Mira can talk about it.
No, you don't even have to care about feelings, Anita.
I know.
But like in medical school or in training, like what has to happen? Do like all the disciplines have to get together and then they vote?
Gosh.
Like what? Tell me.
Okay, just in general, Western medicine is not good about dying. And I don't know the answer to how we get to a different place. I mean, think about even our guests, their spouses. They didn't talk about death with each other because the person who had the diagnosis didn't want to talk about it because they didn't want to confront the idea that they might die, or that if they did talk about it, it was somehow like inviting death or even giving up. So, we have half of our people who died of a long-term illness who never spoke about plans or wishes or what to do in the event that they did die, or passwords, which
Yeah.
Sorry. Now, Mira, you can answer Mel's question too, because you might have a better answer.
My inclination is always to heavily rely upon lived experiences and people like us who are talking about this stuff. And I think that within the medical profession, there needs to be a little bit of a shift more towards listening to people's lived experiences to get feedback. And even aside from all, like, I experienced all the same stuff with the doctors not telling us what was really going on and being very death phobic for sure. But then even once Brian went into hospice, the palliative care doctor, I remember him talking to me, and this was like maybe a day before Brian died. And I remember the palliative care doctor talking to me, and he said, if in 6 months you're still crying every day, seek help. And I always think about this guy and just how he did not understand grief. And this is this is a palliative care doctor. His main job is to support families through the death of a loved one. And if I thought that was what was normal or abnormal in grief, I would, oh my gosh, I don't know where I would be, if I actually thought that was true. Changing the narrative and changing the dynamic, I think that it's really important that people like us speak up about this stuff and that other people listen. And I think that slowly that will integrate. My hope is that slowly that will integrate into the medical profession, the mental health world. And I was really impressed that the OT program wanted me to come in and talk about grief. I was shocked and super impressed by that. And I think it shows tiny little steps forward in that way.
So these discussions, they bring us to this next point of what you guys are doing with your shared experiences. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So we have started a series called Grief Chats, where the whole point is to have these conversations that maybe aren't being had, not just in the grief community or widow community, but among humans and people. And what a disservice it's doing to everyone by not talking about this. And I think anyone that's lived this kind of experience, that's lost somebody, that's in the grieving sphere, understands how important it is to feel connected and less alone, and that we're not crazy, and however we're responding. And like Mira said, this like 6 months, and if after 6 months you're still crying, then you need help. It's like, if we just are listening to kind of these cues from society, we're all going to feel like we're doing it wrong and we're outsiders in this realm. And so I think the importance is by sharing our experience and talking about this, it really does show how vast this grief landscape is and how many different ways are to handle it. And it's all okay. It's not okay because we're all sad and dealing with stuff, but however we handle that's okay. And so I think just bringing these conversations to light, the more we talk about it, the more other people maybe, have this conversation over dinner, over a glass of wine with their kids, with their parents. I think that's ultimately, at least my hope for it, is that these conversations continue and it's not waiting until your person is dying or till after they've died to figure out how to talk about it.
Dana and I know I think at the beginning you guys kind of asked us how we connected, and yeah, it was through the internet. And I had a pretty tricky interaction with a friend of mine that had really highlighted for me, I think, how grief illiterate our society is, and was feeling really alone. And Dana and I kind of connected over that. I think I posted something on the internet and she commented, and then we started chatting, and I just felt like such a kind of kindred spirit kind of connection. And it was like, I think both of us just share this really deep desire to talk about the hard stuff, but really in like a deeper way, like to really kind of dig in and get to the nitty gritty of it all and talk about the hard things and, really kind of go to those places that a lot of people are uncomfortable going with grief. And just talk about this. And then the more we chatted about it, and there were a couple false starts because we're both widows and different things came up, and it took like almost a year basically for us to actually start the series, right? Because this was like right after the 1 year for me that we started talking about doing this, and now it's almost at 2 years for me. And yeah, this fall, it just finally, everything kind of fell into place, and we decided to do a series and make it a video. And kind of the idea is like, every 2 weeks we get together, we usually have a drink and we chat about a different topic within grief. So we did our Grief Illiterate Society first, and the next one that's coming out is going to be about changes within friendships when there's a loss. So we're going to get into that and talking about that topic. And episodes come out every 2 weeks. And yeah, we're not really sure like where it's going to go or how long we're going to do it. But I said to Dana today, we were texting, and I was like, I want to just sit and have these conversations with you, regardless of them being turned into videos and shared with other people. Like it's just, these are conversations that we want to have. And a lot of people seem to also want to have these conversations or hear these conversations. And like Dana said in the very first episode, when we were kind of describing why we wanted to do this, she said, like, sometimes it's easier to hear somebody else talk about it. And I feel like that's a big part of it, is just like, we all want to have these conversations, but they're really hard. And so, you know, we're willing to kind of like throw ourselves in front of the bus and just talk about all these really hard things. We'll definitely do one on sexuality. It's written in stone now, Dana, we can't get out of it. So yeah, we're excited. We're excited.
I wouldn't want to.
Yeah.
Unless you want me to edit it out, and then you can have more time.
Don't edit it out. Yeah, so Grief Chats has been born, and we're really excited about it.
I want to know what taboo topics, what topics you guys think are taboo and that you want to specifically tackle. So you talked about sexuality is going to be one of them. Do you have other ones that are on the plan?
Some of the issues that we've gotten DMs about or private emails about or comments that are kind of missing in the conversation. And so sex comes up over and over and over again. So that's why it's like, we will talk about it because it is like the number one most requested
Really?
topic. Yeah. At least for me. And I think it's the same for Mira.
We grew up in a very religious society, and in that paradigm, it's like, you go to college, you get married, you have kids, and your life keeps getting better and better, and you fill out these checklists, right? Well, I never ever fit into any of the checklists, even though I tried. And so I'm mad that nobody had addressed any of the grief stuff. And I've been to a ton of funerals. I mean, there have been 2 children close to me that I've had to bury and like been very, very close to. I played the piano at a lot of funerals. My parents always took me to funerals. Like, I was never scared of death. I'm not scared of anything. But the death of a spouse is so different than all of that. And I'm mad about it. I'm upset that in the religious paradigm, I was taught, well, if you do all these things, then you'll be happy. And I'm like, I tried all those things. Nothing worked out. Now he's dead. And now your only answer is, well, you'll see him again when you die. And I'm like, but there's this whole middle. And for me, that's been the eye-opening thing where I'm like, I have to share this with people, because that's fine if you feel like there's an end, like you'll see your person again. But what about right now? It's like, it's always hard involving religion. But since you guys talk about taboo things, I'm wondering what your experiences are with that, and do you get people reaching out with those things?
Yeah, that's a really, really tough one. And actually, that's a really good idea for a taboo subject that I don't think we hadn't really discussed maybe talking about yet, but I think it's a really good one. And I mean, I feel like in Canada, obviously there are also religious people in Canada, but I think that religion isn't as ingrained into everything the way that it is in the States. I think that is a difference between Canada and the United States. So maybe I haven't bumped up against that quite as much, but I do get obviously, whenever you're writing about death, you're writing about grief, obviously religion is going to come up, because people's spirituality or how they feel about where their person is now or how they're coping is going to be related to religion somehow, maybe if they are already religious. And so I do get messages all the time like that. And I usually just tend to say something like, you know, if it's, you know, my religion has helped me. And a lot of the time I will get messages from people like to that sort of thing, like, my religion has helped me so much, and because I believe this, you know, I'm not really grieving, or I'm not really hurting in the same way as other people, which sort of seems a little bit like a criticism, right, of me, because I'm definitely not like that. Like, I write very much about, like you said, the middle, like, this is grief now, this is what it's like. You know, I am a spiritual person. I'm not religious at all, but I am a spiritual, and I definitely still feel connected to Brian, and I believe that our souls will be reunited, but I do not feel that at all takes away from the grief and the pain. And I think there's space to hold both. And so it seems like I'm doing it right or something. And I usually just try to sort of let those comments go and say something like, you know, I'm so glad that this has helped you. For me, really sitting with the pain and the grief is a really important part of my process. And I think it's really healthy. Because for me personally, the way that I view that kind of thing is that it's bypassing. It's a way of bypassing pain. It's a way of bypassing the reality of what it's actually like to be in the trenches of like losing a partner and having your whole life blow open. And I think that there's a beauty and there's a sacredness and there's something to be said for just being in that and just experiencing that without bypassing it or feeling silenced from experiencing that.
I think Mel, your perspective is really interesting to me because I am not religious and, grew up culturally Christian. So celebrating the major holidays, but didn't go to church, didn't have that kind of experience. And I have felt jealous of people that have strong religions because they have that kind of built-in community and this strong belief of what happens in the after and that there's heaven and there's all these things. I'm like, feels like to me, it would be so much easier to have that kind of belief and kind of wishing I had more of that at times. And, there's so many other layers and complexities that come with that, but there's been that moment. And I haven't really heard anyone talk about it, how you did, Mel, of that anger that comes of, I did everything right. I'm supposed to be rewarded with these things and my life still imploded. Now what? And so I would love to dive deeper into that. And I think that's so fascinating. And there's so many different perspectives.
Mel, I wanted to say that I have had a lot of people, not a lot, but quite a few people reach out to me that share your similar view. Like, I think it is something that other people do feel, like something that I find I get messages sometimes and it goes like, I believed so much and then I went through this loss and I'm angry with God, or I feel like I've been duped, or what I was taught my whole life, it's not serving me. It wasn't true. Like a sort of like like you're saying, like an anger with religion and with these promises that were made that when you actually go through something really hard, sometimes it doesn't end up really working out or lining up for you the way that you thought it would. But it's so interesting. I can totally see what you're saying too, Dana. Like it's so interesting. It all makes so much sense.
I love all the different perspectives because there, like you said, Dana, there are so many layers and complexities with things like this. And we have a couple friends that are LMFTs, like the marriage and family therapists. And even on our episode, one of our therapist friends was saying that the thing that can help people survive grief is belief in a higher power. So obviously, there's religion and there's spirituality, and for some people those are one and the same, and for some people they're different or opposite. And yeah, I just think that the conversation is so interesting, and there's not a one size fits all, even for these answers.
So it's a continuum, just like everything, there's no right or wrong. It just is somewhere along the line. And I found it so interesting in one of the polls that we've done on Instagram. One of the questions I asked was, I don't know why this has turned into like a religion discussion, but has your relationship with your religion changed after the death of your spouse? And very high number of yes. So then I was like, So I went back in and I said, did you feel like it strengthened your relationship with your religion, or did it weaken your relationship with your religion? Because both things have happened. And it was half and half, both. So half of the people felt it had strengthened and half of them had felt it had weakened. So it was like, it looked like nothing had changed because they equaled each other out in the statistics, whatever, which I found really, really interesting.
I'm learning this for the first time right now. Tell me more.
What else do we learn on Instagram?
We learn a lot of things. I have learned some really weird things too that are probably not
let's
good.
talk about those.
Right. No, because I have another question.
Okay, go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Mira, going back to your palliative care doctor who said if you're crying in 6 months, you're doing it wrong. I'm paraphrasing. But is there, in your opinion, both of you, a point at where intervention is needed and grief is not quote unquote normal anymore?
The palliative care doctor, he actually said seek help if you are still crying at 6 months. And part of the reason why I think that's so funny is that, I mean, I always find the seek help term just strange to begin with, but like I was seeing a grief therapist immediately. Like it's not like I waited until 6 months, then was like, oh, something's wrong, I'm still crying. I was like, I sustained a huge traumatic loss that will deeply impact my life forever. And I'm going to try therapy because that's something that I can try to do. And I wouldn't say I've found the perfect therapist who's made everything okay, but I think that seeking help or, you know, like you said, intervention, any sort of, I would just say like pile on all the support. Like traumatic loss is insane and you need everything that you can get amassed to help you. But in terms of like, is there a point? I don't know. I've been thinking recently about this a lot, actually. Like, is there a point when you are quote unquote stuck in your grief? And I think because I am coming up to 2 years now, and I kind of told myself when Brian died, I was like, initially thought the first year would be really hard. And then I thought it'd be okay. And then when the first year passed, I realized, okay, that's BS, obviously. But I kind of then also did the same thing to myself about the second year, I'm realizing now, where I was kind of like, okay, well then, you know what? Yeah, the second year is also going to be insane. But after 2 years, that like I kind of did put this pressure on myself. And so I think for me, it's really about unlearning those, again, those narratives and those lies that we've been told, because I don't know if I believe that this whole like stuck in your grief. I'd love to hear what Dana would say about this because she's, you know, almost more than double into her grief versus me. But I just have a really hard time. And I really do get my back up when I hear those kinds of things, like somebody is stuck in their grief, because it just feels to me like grief shaming or grief silencing. And I hope that to me, grief and love are so intermingled. And I hope that I'm still grieving for the rest of my life, because to me, that is part of, I hope my grief shifts. I hope it isn't always so raw and so painful all the time. But to me, grief is love. And that's now my connection to Brian is going to be partly also always this loss. And I hope that I just continually learn how to hold that over time, maybe more gracefully and, you know, without quite so much heartache. But if there's always a little bit of heartache, I think that that's okay too. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I think it's such a complex question, like all of them. Unlike Mira, I waited to go see a therapist. Like I don't know why, because of the stigma, because of growing up in a WASPy home where, you know, you don't ask for help or need help. So I think it's interesting. Your question of just like, at what point is there a point where, you know, you do need, and you know, what I immediately went to was this idea of going from grief and feeling the emotions to becoming clinically depressed and needing additional help. And is that on us, the grievers, to know? Are we too stuck, or however we want to, you know, refer to that, to get there? Are we relying on other people? And there is no easy answer in my mind to address that, because I think we all know ourselves best, but when we're can't get out of bed and want to die every day, and you know, it's hard to ask for help. We all tend to be good at saying we're fine and putting on a face. And so, yeah, I think there can come a point where you need more than you're getting, and it becomes more than just we are still grieving to you need more, and that looks different for everybody.
Thank you. I mean, that's like a real question I have. I just think grief is so unique for everybody, and it's so different. And there, like we've established, there is no timeline. But are there boundaries? Are there fences that if you meet up against, then you say, actually, I think I need something additional. You know, something needs to change for me to be able to get through this safely, I guess.
Right. Well, and I think that's the harm of toxic positivity and having to find the silver lining in everything is we don't talk about when we actually can't get there. And why should we have to get there to find the silver lining in these things? But we live in this society where we're supposed to be fine and everything's good and good vibes only. And how hard we are making it impossible to admit that we need more help, whether that's meds, whether that's therapy, whether, whatever that is, we're not doing a service to anyone that's struggling with our current setup in society.
At one point,
and I think we're getting better. I think we are.
At one point in time, so right after my husband died, the first summer, my kids were all home with me out of school, and my 2-year-old at the time fell in the bathtub and needed stitches in his chin. So I took him to get stitches, and 2 days after that, he got lost. And the police found him.
Oh my gosh.
They were like, oh, by the way, we noticed that he has stitches in his chin. And I was honestly like, you should actually arrest me because I would be better off not with my kids. Like, I would be better off if you took my kids away from me. I mean, I didn't really say that, but that's kind of how I felt inside.
Yeah.
Was like, actually, it would be better if you took me to like the psych unit. And that's how I felt, but I don't know why I'm telling you that now. I guess needed to get that off my chest. The end.
But I think that's so normal. And I can only imagine for you guys with kids of just trying to grieve and handle your own grief. And I know Mira, she talks a lot about this and I'm sure has better insight on this, but as an outsider to just be like, I can barely take care of myself. And you have 4 children, 4 little humans that literally rely on you for everything. And how do like just being able to admit that like I should be in a psych ward and my kids would be better off right now is such an important thing to say, because how many people feel that way, like, and then feel so shameful for saying that or feeling that.
So Dana, as a kidless widow, have you experienced imposter widow syndrome since you don't have kids? For example, like, well, I'm not as important because I don't have kids to take care of, or have others put that on you where they're like, well, you'll find someone else. At least you didn't have kids.
I don't know if I feel imposter widow syndrome. I've never actually thought about that. So now that's probably going to be implanted in my brain. And now I'll worry about it. Now I do.
And now she needs extra help because she's gone outside of the fences of normal grief.
Right.
Way to go, Mel.
Sorry.
What has been difficult, and I think this is probably relatable to any woman that's 37 and doesn't have children, is, and especially since I moved to a new community 2 years after Brad died, where it's like trying to make friends with women. It's like almost everyone has kids, is at least how it feels. And so I don't fit in with the mom groups. It's like, I don't fit into these worlds. And then anyone that doesn't have kids are like young and partying. And I'm like, I don't fit into this world. And so it's very hard outside of my friendships that I've had. And, I've helped raise their kids and grown up with their kids. I feel like an outsider always, as a widow without children, as a 37-year-old without children. There's just all these different layers that just make it difficult to navigate. And I don't know if one is harder than the other. Mira and I talked about this briefly, of the idea of not having kids and how many times I wished that I had a piece of Brad. I had some part of him with me and a reason to get out of bed every day and to do these things. And Mira can talk about the other flip side of how difficult it is to grieve and deal with a grieving child who doesn't know how to express her grief as an adult, or, and the difficulties of that and being an only parent.
Every situation is so hard. I love everything that you said. Everything you said feels like everything that I would say. So,
because we're the same person, this is what we're learning.
we get messages from widows that don't have kids sometimes, and they don't feel comfortable posting in the general group sometimes, like our entire collective widow group, because they're worried about offending the moms, because they're like, well, I know what the work entails just from what they've said, or like even just having kids and not having a dead husband is so hard, and so they're so worried about offending them, or they're saying, I don't want to minimize anything they're going through, but yes, here's how I feel, but I will probably never share it. So yeah, I thank you for sharing that, because that's hard. I like that you guys are having open conversations, and whatever your experience is, it's okay, because it's so different.
Well, and it goes into the whole comparison, of grief or of anything, of what does that actually do if we're like, well, mine is worse or yours is worse and I can't live up to it, therefore my story isn't worthy. And I've had so many conversations where I interview people on the Forced Joy Project about their grief and how they get through it. And I've had multiple people send me emails being like, I want to share my story, but it doesn't compare to your story. And this idea that our stories aren't worthy because someone else, their experience is harder, is really sad to me. That you don't feel like yours is worthy of being shared, because they all are.
You
Yeah.
get the same thing. My story's not special, so I don't know if you want to hear it, but it's like everybody's story is.
They all are.
We want all the stories. Every story is important.
Yeah. Something that I have learned through talking to lots of people who are going through grief, and we've talked about this before, Mel, how it's all a big giant Venn diagram, and everybody's experiences are vastly different, but with every single person, you find the things that connect you, that you have shared experiences within your different experiences. And the shared experiences are different for different people, but there's always something that you can find that you share with another person going through grief.
Which, what a great perspective for life, for everything.
I was just listening to you guys, and it's interesting because I feel so oh, it just makes my heart hurt to think that widows who don't have kids would ever feel like their voice isn't valid. As a widow who does have a child, I would never think that in a million years. In fact, I feel like because I know that a lot of widows follow me on Instagram, I think before I write stuff sometimes, because I write a lot about what it is like having a child and some of the really amazing things about having a little piece of Brian with me and this little person who's alongside me in this grief journey. And I feel like I often worry that that is triggering to widows who don't have children, especially if they wanted to have children. And so like that's kind of a different perspective, I guess, on it. But I just think that, like Dana said, to not compare grief is sort of something I try to always come back to and remember, because each of our stories are so unique, and it's just impossible to compare. There's hard things about having kids. There's hard things about being completely alone in it. There's hard things. It's all hard, So I think that's just important to remember.
As someone who doesn't have kids and didn't have kids with Brad, it's not seeing widows who have kids. It's just seeing life continue. It's my other friends get pregnant. It's people get married. It's all these normal life things that are happening that aren't happening to me because my husband died. I think that's harder than other widows, that their life is so hard that I'm never seeing that and being like, oh, like, at least she has D, and it's better. It's the outside people who have no idea of this experience that are just living life in this bliss and so unaware of what this entails. That's more difficult for me, of just living, getting the pleasure to just live, the privilege to live without all of this being part of their life.
But we've talked about also how everybody has their thing. And so we can't even compare our widow experience to their hard things that they have in their life, because everybody has something. And some of those things I'm like, ooh, I would rather have a dead husband than what they have. So
you guys are the best. There's nothing I love more than people that know how to hold space. So this is the ultimate test in holding space. And I appreciate you all so much. Like, I just really appreciate you. I had sort of something that was bopping around in my mind, but it might be too big of a question. And if it is, we can just ignore it and not include it. But okay. My brain was going back to the previous question that you guys asked us about, like, are you ever stuck in your grief kind of thing? And because I feel like then when Dana went and started talking about her perspective, it got me thinking of this whole other thing I've been thinking about, which is sort of, when is there a point when grief becomes something more than grief? And how do you know when, like, I think one of you mentioned, when it turns into sort of more chronic mental health challenges, and what, like, where do you, that's something I've really struggled with in grief, and being somebody who grievers write to and connect with, because sometimes I'm not sure, like, I definitely had moments, and I'm pretty open about this, especially within the first year, but even after the first year, I had moments when I did not have a will to live. Like, the pain was so great, and it was so painful to just be alive grieving, and I was like, I don't know if this grief is ever going to change or get easier, and it is exhausting to imagine living for X number of years with this pain in my heart. But I knew that I wasn't suicidal, and I knew that there was a difference between not having a will to live versus actually wanting to kill myself. Like, I know that, and I know Megan Devine writes about this a little bit, and I really appreciate that. Like, she writes about how it's normal to not have a will to live in the way that you did before, especially in early grief. But I'm wondering, like, do you guys, what are your guys' thoughts on that? Like, how do you know when it sort of morphs from grief into something else? Like, it's so murky.
Yeah. Like, when are the alarms? Like, is it like alarm bells going? And we have talked about this. We've talked about being suicidal and also being passively suicidal, which is kind of more along the lines of like, I don't have a will to live. I'm not going to do anything to try and keep myself safe. We have spent some time talking about that. And on the flip side of that, I did have suicidal thoughts after my husband died. And when I chatted with another widow and I told her the thoughts, and she wasn't alarmed, she said, "Of course you're having those thoughts." I felt so relieved to not have somebody be like, "Anita, you need to get help. It's not okay to have those thoughts," And so it's like this really, I don't want to be responsible for saying like, "Of course you have those thoughts," and then somebody, goes through with it. So it does feel like a huge load. And the answer that I have come up with is that the line is when there's a plan. And when there's a plan, then that is when help needs to be sought. So if there's a timeline and a means and a way, then that's when you have to intervene. So
I think that's valid. Yeah. That's a really good marker that's probably universally accepted. Are you having suicidal ideations? Okay, well, that's when it's time to get some help and go maybe check in to the hospital, work with some professionals. And up until that point, I think there's a lot that's murky, because I'm sure we all know people that have died by suicide, and sometimes you see the signs and sometimes you don't, or sometimes they kind of coast along life having ins and outs of the signs, and then one thing triggers them and something happens in the brain, and then, and so it's such a tricky topic. But I mean, I'm looking at my own life with widowhood, and it's been hard for me to not be passively suicidal for a long time. So I would say probably for the first year and a half, I felt like that. I also was coming off of a really bad car accident before my husband died. So I was dealing with like a lot of stuff. And anyway, when he died, and I'm 3 years out. I have a hard time naturally feeling that there's joy in the world, but I feel stable. So maybe if things dip from that stability, that's a sign. And the more that people can check in with friends and tell them how they're feeling, if you're not able to tell how you are doing, they can maybe help you be that person that can kind of assess. It's hard and it's sticky. And Mira, I like that you use the word murky. It's perfect for that.
So I have a 14-year-old daughter, and when she was doing therapy, I was really surprised to find out that she was worried about me being suicidal. And so her therapist, had me come in and we talked about it. And it was like, actually, we need to be talking about these things with people. Like, yes, I've had suicidal thoughts. No, I'm not having them now. I know the difference because like it's her worst fear that I'm gone, and she sees me falling apart all the time. And so in her 14-year-old brain, she's like, mom's gonna commit suicide. And so it's like we had to open up a conversation that said, yes, I know what that feels like, and no, I'm not there now. So,
and I think that's the important thing, and you've all kind of touched on this, of having that conversation, because if you're feeling it and you don't have anyone you can tell, hey, I'm having these thoughts, or these thoughts are shifting, how does anyone know to help you? And so often when we're in that space, we're not able to ask for help and to say that if we don't have that safe space. And so how do we check in on our friends who, are struggling in whatever ways? And so many people are struggling in ways that we never see, but just check in. And again, I think it's why we share openly about these things, to kind of normalize like these thoughts that are very dark and scary to have. And the more we talk about it, the more hopefully someone else can, even if it's a stranger on the internet, to reach out and be like, I'm having these thoughts. Like you said, like that takes a load off when someone's like, of course you're having these thoughts. I've had those thoughts too. It allows that person to feel like they can keep reaching out, maybe if that shifts.
Whew.
Yes, I love it. All of the hard topics.
Now you guys have 6 more topics to cover. You're right. Okay.
Cool.
I think
What a great question, Mira.
Yeah.
One day we all need to hang out, because this is the best.
At Mira's place.
Yeah.
Woo, come to Canada.
That doesn't exist.
No internet.
I require Wonder Bars, Mira.
I would love it.
So, Mira and Dana, how can people find you? What is your channel called? And we will link to that in the show notes. Tell us one more time. Dana.
Everything is Forced Joy Project. So that's my Instagram handle. And then forcedjoyproject.com is the website. And you can find everything from there. And Grief Chats is linked on there as well. And that's the name of our YouTube channel, is Grief Chats.
Mira.
My handle is New Moon Mira, and my website is New Moon Mira. Pretty simple.
Well, wait. But while you're thinking, I will ask the most important question that we ask everybody. What is your guys' favorite cheese? Dana, go.
Oh my gosh. What an impossible question, because I love all cheeses.
You can have like up to 3 choices.
Okay. I think feta is the one I put on everything and eat the most, which is kind of a weird choice, but I love it. Extra sharp white cheddar, Tillamook specifically for the brand. And then, oh gosh, like brie, maybe baked brie with like jam oozing out and Triscuits. Like I want the whole thing.
Okay, Mira.
Okay,
your turn.
You guys are not going to believe it, but those are literally my 3 favorite cheeses, and I'm obsessed with Triscuits. I swear to God, like really, seriously.
Dana, you did not even know this. I can tell.
No, we have not talked about this.
Thank you so much for joining us. It was really fun to chat with 2 of you at once, and we're excited to see where the Grief Chats go and which terrible topics you guys choose to discuss, and we'll watch with glee. We'll be like, yes, watch them hash it out. It will be really exciting.
We support you.
And we just love more voices in being honest about your grief experiences, because like we've all said, it helps to feel like you're not going crazy and that you're actually just a normal human being.
Yes.
Thank you.
Remember to check out the Widow Wives Club, answer all of the questions. Yes, all of them. You guys can check out our Patreon, patreon.com/WWDN, and buy us a taco at buyusacoffee.com/widowwedonow. And remember to give us a rating and review, because I want one really bad. And that is all. And until we talk to you next time, thanks for joining us. I'm Anita.
I'm Mel.
And we're just 2 young widows, and one widow who has super tough ears from living in the tundra of Canada, and another young widow who has too many projects and not enough brains to keep track of all the projects. And we're just trying to figure out,
Widow,
we do now. This is my favorite thing to discuss with you.
tell me, what is it?
One of my favorite things. I do enjoy tacos and cheese and dogs. This is about how you cannot pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars for a phone plan, especially when you're a widow, your person is dead, you might have kids, you might need another option, and you just want your phone to work, you want unlimited texting and service, and you want it to be like $25 a month.
It blows my mind that they have plans that start at $15 a month. That is so cheap. And the cool thing is it uses other 5G networks, and so you don't have to pay extra for that, and you still get great service.
Yep, Anita and I have traveled all over, and I have used my phone. So I highly recommend it. And my mom's even on it. When my dad died, we put his phone down to the cheapest plan, which is $15 a month. And I think my mom's on the $20 a month plan, and it's so worth it. It's so much cheaper than what we were all paying before. So I highly recommend it if you're on a budget or not. Who cares? Ryan Reynolds is in charge of the company, and they send you free stickers with Ryan Reynolds temporary tattoos. It's kind of the best. So if somebody wants to sign up, what can they do, Anita?
Go to trymintmobile.com/WWDN. Seriously, you guys, such a great idea. Save yourself some money.
And if you're worried about losing data or having any changes with your phone, not going to happen. They walk you through it. Everything's fine. It's the easiest process of all time. Again, that's
trymintmobile.com/WWDN.